When I was a youngin', oh, I want to sing it, see. When I was a youngin', I knew very little, and at a church supper I sat down for victuals. I tasted a legume that was so serene, love at first sight with a greasy bean. That's the Z. These beans were so fat, like they could explode, and down my gizzard more and more flowed. So tender and flavored, last fall's hog fat. Pass the beans, I'll have more of that. Crazy beans, crazy beans, crazy beans, crazy beans. Oh, how I love crazy beans. Amongst all the beans that I've ever seen, none can compare to the greasy bean. Now for greasy bean, the best way to sows at the foot of field corn, up which they'll grow. Make sure your corn's at least 2 feet high, cause these beans can climb down near to the sky. I say climb, not climb. This Latin isn't cracked up. Anyway, Phaseolus vulgaris, a fine species, has many splendid varieties, like October beans, goose beans, and turkey.
All these beans came off of a 4 foot by 8 foot raised bed. So saving seeds could be done in a very small area. But this turkey craw bean, when we first collected the story, and we write these stories on boards in Victory Gardens so that everybody that can come can read them. It was from a man named Ben Harrison. Ben was a World War II vet.
Now for the Yankees and uninitiated, I'll tell you something that long I have hated. That's when fools pick greasy beans far too young. They should be fat and full and then unstrung. When they lay me down to rest, pile greasy bean seeds all on my chest. Wait, no, that'd be a horrible waste. Plant them yourself and have you a taste. Greasy beans, greasy beans, oh, how I love greasy beans. Amongst all the beans that I've ever seen, none can compare to the greasy bean. Thank you.
Hey Deanna, I'm glad you could be here.
Nice seeing you too.
I think he teaches senior center. Exactly what
The voices of Native Americans, which concentrate on that area, and it's been very important. The voices of Native Americans, which are still being ignored in foodways on a large scale, which we have to work very, very hard to bring to the fore. And the story of cultures, immigrant cultures, the experience of immigrants, but also very much the story of Appalachian culture, because we have been othered. For those of you who are familiar on a casual basis with Jungian psychology, which is the only way I'm familiar with it, but Jung talks about the necessity of creating the shadow. You create something outside of yourself that embodies all of the darkness that you have inside of yourself that you are unwilling to acknowledge. The South has been the shadow for the United States of America, and Appalachia has been the shadow of the South. It's always the place that you can turn to and say, we may be bad, but this is worse.
These beans were so fat, like they could explode, and down my gizzard more and more flowed. So tender and flavored, with last fall's hog fat. Pass the beans, I'll have more of that. Greasy beans, greasy beans. Oh, how I love greasy beans. Amongst all the beans that I've ever seen, none can compare to the greasy bean. Now for greasy bean, the best way to sow's at the foot of field corn, at which they'll grow. Make sure your corn's at least 10 to feet high, cause these beans can clam them near to the
So,
sky.
Dr. Martell, so far how the organization, even that you are teaching in the English department, how is this interaction coming around?
I'm very fortunate to work with sustainable development because their work answers a lot of the fundamental questions that my classes and my research raise. For instance, I always wonder what next, what does this look like? I can come to a position that I think is philosophically ethical or morally sound, but sometimes the execution is where I feel like I need inspiration. And so I look to my colleagues and the students of sustainable development in order to show me how to start implementing some of the ideas that I come up with and that my students come up.
I volunteered at Against the Grain, which is where all these posters are from.
I still want to get involved there, but
We also talked about food insecurity on our campus, so within the broader community, as well as community efforts to address this problem. Lessons that led to the opening of the food pantry in the ASU Office of Sustainability, as well as the opening of the Watauga and Ashe County Seed Library. So we had real outcomes with this. It is my hope that following today's conversations, we can take concrete steps towards addressing food waste and strengthening our existing efforts towards food recovery. Food waste is significant not only because it is unjust to waste food while others go hungry, but also because of food waste's role as a driver of climate change. Food waste is the largest contributor to landfills in the U.S., and landfills account for 34% of all methane emissions in the U.S. And we also know that methane is a powerful greenhouse gas. Today's event centered around the idea of building a regenerative community, self-healing, self-sustaining, innovative, and resourceful.
My name's Blake Hornsby. A community garden is very important, partially to help with food insecurity, because a lot of people in the area can't have a lot of access to food, and a lot of people who do have access to food don't have access to a lot of organic foods, or they don't really have experience from picking from the ground. And it's very important to have experience from picking food from the ground and seeing a community of other people doing it. And it'd be nice if community gardens were like the entire idea for entire towns and cities, that there'd be community gardens everywhere, community gardens on the side of the street. That's the idea. And then on top of all that, you get all the therapeutic properties of nature. Instead of like going into the woods when you don't have time, you can be in the garden with all these plants, like whenever you're passing through class or you're walking through town or anything like that.
yeah, they start